Welcome to another episode of the Chronic Comeback podcast. This week, today, I'm really excited to have on the show Marci Nevin. So just to give you a quick introduction to Marci's story before we get into the podcast. Marci's actually someone that I would view, and anyone would view from the outside, as a picture of health. She's a certified personal trainer and runs her own online coaching business, helping others achieve their own optimal fitness. And yet what people don't realize is Marci had to deal with a number of chronic health issues, including Hashimoto's, gut issues, psoriasis, Lyme disease, just to name a few. Despite all of this, she's a constant source of positivity to her followers on social media. And I was actually speaking to her before this podcast, and I let her know that I recently listened to an episode that she did a while ago. And she talked about the importance of not playing the victim. And this is something that is huge, in my opinion. It can be huge in recovery, and something that people don't really like to talk about because it can potentially hurt people's feelings. But it's something that I would like to get into when we talk about it in a bit. For someone like me who has chronic health issues but can't currently work out or do sport, it's a real inspiration and motivation to me to see her doing what she's doing. So really excited to have her on the show. Thank you so much for coming on, and sorry for doing such a long introduction. I didn't mean to do that.
No worries. No apologies needed. I appreciate the kind words. That was very nice to hear.
Awesome. Cool. Well, what I'd like to do at the beginning is to really go back to the beginning. And if you could talk to us a little bit about how life was before you start to get any sort of health issues, and then just take us through that initial period of time where you started to notice symptoms. And if you could take us through that bit of the story.
Absolutely. So looking back on my childhood, I was a very healthy kid from what I remember. I even won an award. It was maybe 4th or 5th grade, where I didn't have any absences, so no sick days. So I was fairly healthy. And I did have the occasional bout of, sinus infections, ear infections. And I'll take you way back to before I was even born, but, psoriasis, autoimmune diseases run in my family. And then I was born via C-section. So if you put the pieces together, anyone who is listening, you know that all of those things can be insults to your overall health. So one, I had the genetic disposition for autoimmunity. I had the C-section birth, which I'm basically missing out on all of the bacteria from my mother that is important for a robust, gut microbiome for myself. And then to add insult to injury, I, had the occasional illness where I needed antibiotics. So that wipes out your good bacteria as well. And then I think my parents did the best they could with how they raised me in terms of my diet. But I definitely ate the standard American diet for many years, fast food and sugary cereal and, stuff like that, which I do think that can play a role. So I had all of these things that were what I would call, genetics loads the gun, environment pulls the trigger type of situation. So the cards were definitely stacked against me. But at this time, I had no idea. My parents had no idea. Again, we were just doing the best that we could. So I was very healthy for most of my life, never any symptoms when I was a kid, nor when I was a teenager. I got really into fitness when I was 12 years old. I was kind of overweight. I was self-conscious. So I started exercising in my parents' living room. And that kind of led to wanting to make better choices with my nutrition. I started diets when I was probably 13, 14. And I got really into exercise when I was, I think, 15 years old. And then I went to college and things took kind of a different turn. And I would say that I became a little bit obsessive with it and definitely developed, I wouldn't say a full-blown eating disorder, but disordered eating practices. I over-exercised. I am a type A personality, very high stress, always in my head, perfectionist, people pleaser, all of the things. So I think that with college, like, yes, I was having a good time, but I was also stressed out, not sleeping enough, exercising too much, under eating, not fueling my body properly with proper nutrients, drinking alcohol. So again, just like all these insults, but still felt pretty good. I did end up becoming like severely underweight, but still felt healthy. I was able to go to the gym twice a day. My workouts were strong, all of that. And then what happened was, it was Memorial Day weekend of my junior year of college. Again, felt fine. I went on this houseboating trip, and when I came home, I noticed that I was very itchy. So my scalp was itching, my back was itching. I was like, this is so weird. What is going on? And I just chalked it up to, all right, you were on a houseboat for 4 days. You didn't shower. You're probably dirty, like you just need to clean yourself off and you'll be good. So took a hot shower, tried to go to bed, and I literally itched myself to sleep. It was so uncomfortable. When I woke up the next day, I was covered from pretty much head to toe in these red lesions. So of course I'm freaking out. I have no idea what's going on. I'm Googling all the things to figure out what it could possibly be. I'm asking my sorority sisters. And, kind of what I was thinking at that point was possible poison oak, because that is how it was presenting. And or I guess like other people who had gone to, I was at Lake Shasta prior, had also come back with poison oak. So I was getting out off the boat, like kind of in the woods. So it would have made sense that I could have contracted something. And that is what it looked like. So these red blotches all over me. So I gave it a couple of days. Things weren't getting better. If anything, it was starting to get worse. And I went to our health center, and the doctor there did diagnose me with poison oak. She gave me a cortisone cream. I started to put that on, and it was not doing anything. And then the lesions were continuing to spread. So here I am, a 21-year-old girl in college, very conscious of her appearance, freaking out. Like, I literally look like, an alien in a sense, and like worried that people were going to notice. And it was hot. So like I was wearing or wanting to wear, fairly revealing clothes like shorts and t-shirts or tank tops. And I had these splotches all over that were just, in my mind, like unsightly. So that was right before the summer of my junior year. I went home to California. I was in college at Oregon, and my mom got me an appointment with a dermatologist. Actually, before that, I went to a dermatologist up in, I went to the emergency room. Sorry, it's been like 20 years.
Oh, no. Yeah, I do this all the time, flip-flop back and forward. Yeah.
I'm like, so what was the chain of events? So I finally went to the emergency room in Oregon, and they said, oh, this looks like psoriasis, which is an autoimmune skin disorder. So then got an appointment at the dermatologist in California. He did a biopsy. He diagnosed me with psoriasis and basically said, yep, you're going to have this your entire life. And I will never forget, he was so cold. He had a horrible bedside manner. And I asked him, I said, like, is this going to get worse? And he's like, I have no way of knowing. Like, you're going to have it forever. It could get worse. It might not. We don't really know. So I'm just freaking out that I was going to have this. I will have it the rest of my life, but that it was going to look like this the rest of my life, that it could potentially get worse. And all of these thoughts started to go through my head, like, oh, I'm never going to have a boyfriend. I'm never going to get married. Like no one's going to like me or love me. So it was a very, very challenging time. So at that point, I didn't really know anything about alternative methods to deal with autoimmunity. And I just wanted it gone. So they gave me cortisone cream, and I started to take that. And basically what it does, not cortisone cream, like a steroid cream. So you put that all over the lesions and they do go away, but then it thins your skin. It makes your skin very white. So it was not the best solution, but at least like knocked things out. So I felt like I could live my life without worrying about how I looked. So let's go to now senior year of college. Right before graduation, I was at the gym. I went to the gym every single morning to do my cardio. I was on the step mill just like I always had been. And I suddenly could not breathe. So my chest was very tight. I couldn't take a full breath. And I was like, oh, that's really weird. And so, well, maybe I need to go to the treadmill. So I went to the treadmill, same thing. And all these thoughts were going through my mind, like, well, am I sick? Like, what's going on? So that continued for weeks. And now I'm thinking like I have a heart problem and I'm going to die. Like all of these thoughts were going through my head. I did not correlate it to the autoimmunity. But looking back, knowing what I do now, I'm sure that there was something that did connect the two. So that started. And then I also started to develop like horrible brain fog where I felt like I was either high or drunk most of the day. It was awful. It was basically, I mean, there were times where I was like, I would rather be dead than feel the way I do. So I ended up graduating. I moved home to California. I started a job, all of that. And things like started to get better and then they would worse, kind of like what you and I were talking about before we started recording. Like your symptoms will definitely wax and wane. So I had them all. I had the brain fog, I had the fatigue, I had the pain, neurological symptoms, all of that. And I just started going from doctor to doctor and I had like literally every test run that you could, like the blood work, the MRIs, I don't even know what else they were looking for. MS, pituitary tumors. I had blood work that showed that maybe I was developing leukemia and no doctor really like could get to the bottom of it. So I eventually, for whatever reason, stumbled upon more of like a holistic naturopathic route. I started reaching out to those types of doctors. And I ended up finding a guy in North Carolina who believed that it was probably coming from poor gut health. So we did some testing there. I was working with him and things weren't getting like a whole lot better. So I even did genetic testing, like 23andMe, and my genetics are just a shit show. Like I had everything stacked against me, like MTHFR, like all this stuff that makes it hard to detoxify and whatnot. So anyway, I'm working with this guy for a little bit, getting some answers, but just not really making progress. And eventually he sends me an email and he says, where in California are you located? And I said, I'm in the Bay Area. And he's like, okay, I want you to go see this guy in Santa Rosa. Didn't tell me why. Just was like, go see him. And I was like, all right, that's a little weird, but sure, I'll do whatever at this point if it makes me feel better. So drive, an hour and a half up to Santa Rosa. I meet with this guy. He was lovely. And what I liked about him is that he was both like a medical doctor and a naturopath. So he kind of could combine the both of those worlds. I really trusted him. He had a great bedside manner. He starts asking me these questions. And then at the end of his, what do you call it? Not diagnosis, checkup, so to speak. Yeah. Thank you. He's like, well, here's the thing. I think that you have some critters, like that was the word he used. I think you have some critters living among you. And I was like, what does that mean? He's like, I think you have Lyme disease. And I was like, oh, okay, interesting. Like no one had ever talked to me about that. And, you said that you saw like the rash, right? Or like you felt the bite, something?
Yeah. Well, I saw a bite, yeah.
Yeah. And I saw nothing, no bite, no bullseye rash, none of that. And I know that like vector-borne illnesses cannot be just from ticks. So it could be mosquitoes, it can be other things. So sometimes you don't present with the rash, which was maybe what was going on with me. So anyway, he does all this blood work. And he's like, it's going to take probably 6 weeks because the blood has to culture. So I was at like week 5 and hadn't heard anything. I'm like, oh, cool. I'm in the clear. And then suddenly I get a call and they're like, oh, one of your tests came back positive. So yes, you do have Lyme disease. And that was just a total blow. So I'm freaking out, I'm going down the rabbit hole, like researching all the things. And yeah, it was tough. So he started to treat me somewhat, but I just really was not making a whole lot of progress. Like we worked on my gut, we worked on all these other things. I was taking so many supplements and feeling better, but just not 100%, and my psoriasis for the most part was well managed. I had a little bit of like a few spots here and there, but nothing that I was really overly concerned with. And then in the middle of all of this work that I was doing, I did end up developing like another major outbreak. So at that point I was like, I'm not going on the cortisone creams. I'm not doing anything. Like I had really started to follow the more natural route. I was on like a very strict paleo diet called the autoimmune protocol to like try to keep things either, I know that the protocol cannot make the disease go away, but at least put it in remission. So that was kind of keeping the symptoms at bay. But at some point, despite all of that, I did have another outbreak, just like the first one, was covered head to toe. So I started to do light therapy, laser treatment. It corrected it. And I really have not had another major outbreak since. But yeah, just continued to try to go to, person after person, but not making much progress. And then by the grace of God, a few years ago, I came across a man. His name is Vince Pitstick. He is kind of like he's not a doctor, but he's like a functional medicine practitioner, we'll call it. And I saw all these amazing success stories from him with women who had similar situations like mine. So I reached out. We got on a call. I had sent him all of my lab work. And he said to me, he's like, your case is one of the most severe I've ever seen. But I promise you, if you follow the plan, if you do exactly as I say, like I will heal you. Like I've got you, don't worry. So I did. We ran protocols for Lyme, for Epstein-Barr, for gut health. And within 10 weeks, I don't want to say cured because I'll never be fully cured of any of those things. Lyme, Epstein-Barr, they lay dormant, they never go away. Same thing with autoimmune conditions. But I feel like a completely different person. So he changed my life. Like, yes, I had to do the work, but ever since then, I've been good. The other thing that I failed to mention is chronic pain as well, chronic back pain, chronic foot pain. And I was in the fitness industry. Like one, I love to work out for myself, but I was also a personal trainer for 12 years. So on my feet all the time. So yeah, that was very painful. Like having to stand all day, like when your feet hurt and your back hurts, and it was miserable. So here I am doing much better.
Wow.
That was long-winded. Sorry.
No. That was, there's a lot of questions I have for you. Wow. 10 weeks, that's amazing. That must have been, I can only imagine the release it will feel I will get once I have that kind of major, where I feel, even 90, 95%, let alone, close to that 100%. So, to do that in 10 weeks must have just felt so good. When you say now these days you're, I know you don't want to say like cured, but do you have any symptoms on a day-to-day basis?
Occasionally, like I still do get a little bit of brain fog, I would say. I do have some digestive issues from time to time, but I would say just like in terms of like my overall energy, it's far better than it was. A couple of years ago, I had like horrible insomnia. Yeah. Even working with Vince originally, my sleep was still disrupted. It's just now gotten better within like the past 9 months. So not sure if that's just because of like all of the healing I've been doing, also like gaining some weight, eating more food. So maybe my body just feels like it's safer. Stress in certain areas of my life is better. But a couple of months ago, actually, I started having like horrible intestinal pain. Like I was like, oh great, here we go again. But that was really scary because it's interesting. Like since I started working with Vince, and it's been about 2 years now, I don't even think about my health, like when I have like a symptom pop up, it's not like, oh no, what is this? Like in going down that rabbit hole or like that, mind spiral that I used to do all the time. Like, again, you mentioned, you want to find like a community and people who are going through the same thing. So I was a part of all these Facebook groups, consulting Google every time I felt a symptom, self-diagnosing with all of these, very serious conditions, which I think just made things worse. Like your mindset is so powerful. And then sometimes I feel like it can also become a self-fulfilling prophecy that if you're thinking all those things, like, and that's what you're focusing your attention on, like you're going to get more of that. What we focus on expands. Excuse me. So yeah, for the past couple of years, I just felt great. And it was like, oh, this is wonderful. I'll never have to worry about my health again. And then to start to feel that those like sensations come back, I was like, oh no, what's going on? And they just started to get worse and worse and worse. So I ended up calling an advice nurse at the hospital, Kaiser. And she's like, well, this sounds more gynecological than it does intestinal. And I was like, nah, I don't believe that. But she, based on symptoms, she had to set me up with a gynecologist appointment. So of course, I went back to my old ways and started Googling, and I was like, oh, great, I have ovarian cancer. Like I basically, like, I was like, this is it. I was, and I don't know if you've done this, but like, I was like plotting how I was going to like tell Instagram, like, what am I going to do with my business? Like, what am I going to say to my followers? Like all this stuff. So I went to the appointment. I ended up not having cancer, thank God, but the pain just continued to get worse. By the next week, I thought I had appendicitis. So I went to the urgent care. I'm not going to share what like was really going on. It's kind of embarrassing, to be honest, but yes, everything is good now. I kind of like fixed that issue, but it's not to say that like things are always perfect. But I know that I have like someone on my side now who, whenever something is going on, like he will fix it. And yeah.
I think what you said there was like, it resonates with me a lot in terms of when I first started to get things that seemed a lot more serious, where, when, you're used to, you're getting ill or something happening, and then it goes away after a week, always goes after a week, maybe 2 weeks max.
Mm-hmm.
And when something hasn't gone away after 3 weeks, then it's like, oh wow, this is worrying. And then when it's like 2-3 months, I remember just like being there, just like after like 3 months, I was like, this is insane. Like, how is this still going on? And that's when you start to really worry. And you're typing in Google, you're doing, and I was just like you, spiraling out of control. Like my mind, like the week I was convinced, because of all my symptoms, I had MS. Convinced.
Who did I?
Yep. Yeah. And the worst thing about that was I turned up. So I had a brain and spine scan, and I couldn't sleep all week because I was like freaking out that I had MS. So by the time I got to see the guy on Friday, who had already told me he didn't think I did have it, I looked like I hadn't slept for a week because I hadn't. And he was like telling me, oh, well, it's just down to anxiety. And of course I looked like an anxious wreck because I'd been through all that. But he obviously didn't know about all the Lyme, mold, all of that kind of stuff. So, I guess my point was that, but these days now, like whenever I get symptoms or anything like that, I don't let it get to that point anymore. And that's, I think it's really cool that you're saying that, in the last 2 years, it is more like, something comes up and, you've overcome this now. And that must be such a empowering feeling for you, I imagine.
It's very empowering. And, I was sitting in a meditation a couple of months ago. I don't really meditate much anymore. And I kind of had this epiphany moment, like, wow, it's been months since I did a body scan to see what my psoriasis lesions are doing, like if they are still there, when it used to be a daily thing. Like I would scan my entire body, like, oh, is there a new one? Is this one gone away? So that feels really good. And it's kind of like the work I do with my clients who, because I am a nutrition and fitness coach, with emotional eating, like a lot of people are living in these like cages because of the relationship that they have with the food. And it's like, it consumes them. It consumes like their every thought. And, it's difficult for them to go out to eat or to just like live a free life. And I was like, this is exactly what I want for my clients, is to have that same type of freedom that I now feel with my health, where it's not all consuming, because it can ruin your life. It takes away so much, and I'll be honest. This is part of the story I did not share, is I was married at the time. So I got married. I met my husband when I was at the recruiting company that I was telling you about. Yeah. And we were together for about 3 years. So he was with me every step of the way when I was going through all this stuff, like, going to the doctor's appointments, dealing with all the symptoms. And I will admit, I was probably not that fun to be around because I was so in my head. I was always just, researching the things, talking about it, worrying about it. But I will say, and that can be exhausting because I have been with people who talk about their symptoms incessantly. And it's like, you want to be supportive, but at some point it's like, okay, we got to move on from this. Like, I'm sick of hearing about it.
Yeah.
So he was a saint in one regard. But I never let it impact my day to day. So I went to work every day. I worked 6 or 7 days per week as a trainer. I was getting up at 4:30 in the morning to train clients. Like, I was holding it down. I went to the gym every day. Like, we went on vacations. It in no way impacted like our overall quality of life. And then we ended up getting married. And I'd say within a year and a half, our marriage ended. He is the one who asked for the divorce. And I was completely blindsided. I had no idea, because he had never really said to me that like, this is an issue. Like, we did have some issues in our relationship that I blamed on my health, but he always was very supportive of me, and what I wanted to do next to try to like the next person I wanted to work with, whatever. So anyway, when he came home one day, I was like, I don't want to be married to you. I was like, excuse me, what? You don't want to be married to me? And I was like, well, I don't understand why. And he said, because I don't want to have to take care of somebody the rest of my life. And I was like, take care of somebody? Like, I take care of myself pretty well. But what I think he meant now, like looking back, is he didn't want to have to be that like emotional sounding board. And I understand. So yeah, it can impact your life in so many ways, not just your own personal life, like the quality of your life, what you allow it to and stop you from doing, but also it can impact the people in your life as well.
What's funny, you talked about getting up at 4:30 in the morning, holding it down and literally hanging by a thread, I can imagine, like some days. And that's exactly how I feel like I've lived a lot of this kind of part of my life. And the negative that can come with that, aside from the fact that you're probably not great for your health, is the fact that people just see you as someone who's not that bad.
You don't look sick.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you don't look sick, but also you're doing things you shouldn't be able to do if you're supposedly that ill.
Right.
And that's I was playing football, I was going to the gym like incessantly, but I was in a lot of pain. I felt like crap. But I was like, it was almost like I need to prove to myself that I can still do it. And it's probably why I'm so chronically injured now, that I now can't do all these things. But I think that played into like people. I almost just felt I was like imposter syndrome when I was like speaking to people about it, because they were like, but they didn't say this, but I swear I could feel them thinking it, like, you were just in the gym, like, how are you? And I'd almost have to play it down a little bit. And did you feel that you were kind of like almost like living a dual life, like in front of your clients being this like picture of health and pushing yourself, but then back home, I guess, having to unload on the one person that's closest to you, and that's why it had the impact on your marriage?
For sure. And I use my mother as a sounding board too. Like, she was a saint too. She was very helpful getting me through all of this. But I think at some point she kind of became exhausted by it as well. And there were a couple of clients who I was very close to who knew what was going on. So I could just be honest with them, like, hey, like, it's a really bad day, not feeling great. And they would be okay with that. But yeah, most of the time I just had to pretend like nothing was going on. And I would have a split schedule where I would get there really early in the morning, 5:36, stay until, I don't know, maybe 10 or 11, and then go home and just crash and have to, lay on the couch and take a nap, but then have to motivate myself to go to the gym and do a hard workout and go back to training clients later in the day. So it was a grind for sure. And I believe that I was not doing myself any favors, because going back to what I was saying in the beginning of the episode, my self-worth for a very long time was tied up in how I looked. So I was self-conscious about my appearance for a very young age. And then when I got into shape, it's like that was my control. So I felt like, oh, the only thing I really have to offer the world, so to speak, is how I look, is my body. And so I had a very poor relationship with my body and believed that, I had to look a certain way so I could not take care of my health. Like my physique had to come first, right? So I know that I pushed myself way too hard. I mean, I think that the whole reason I got myself into the situation in the first place was because I pushed myself too hard. But yeah, I couldn't stop. Like it was just, I don't want to say it was an addiction, but it was an obsession. And I felt like, oh yeah, this is all I have to offer is how I look. And so I can't, like, God forbid I stop working out, like what would happen?
Yeah. No, again, that resonates with me. Like it's same with pushing myself at work, pushing myself, physically. I needed to be able to control those areas of my life and excel in those areas of my life, so that so it would make me feel better about my health. And it's kind of a bit of a strange mindset. And then I realized when I mentioned to you for the podcast, in that ayahuasca retreat that I went to recently, I realized that I'd not been putting my health first. Although I'd spent God knows how much money and been kind of doing a lot of crazy things to try and get my health better, I still didn't always put my health first. I would put, like, as you said, like aesthetic, the way I looked, or, the amount of money I needed to earn. And I still struggle with that now. And I think that is difficult. But going back to, what we were talking about, there are some people who listen to this show who are like bed bound, they can't go to work, and then there are others who have come on the show who are maybe a bit more like me and you, where they're not bed bound, but it is a 24/7 thing. This isn't a thing that ever leaves. They've got symptoms constantly and they're in a really bad spot. But for me, the mental side of it is still the same, and that's where we all share a commonality. Maybe our symptoms are different, the severity are different, but we all have go through that same kind of horrible mindset that we have to go through. For you, like, was that almost as difficult as the physical stuff, the stuff that we had to go through mentally?
Yeah, it definitely was, because it was all rooted in fear. And what is my life going to look like if this continues to get worse? Because going back to what I was saying about the body image or how hard I worked, like that was another way that I felt a sense of self-worth, was how much I could do. So it became this identity, how I look, how much I can do. And if that is taken away from me, then what do I have? So that was a struggle, definitely. And every day I would think about it, like, what if I can't go to the gym anymore? Or, whatever the case may be, like, what if I have kids one day and I can't raise them properly, and then they have this like sick mom? So yeah, it was something that it was on my mind most hours of the day. It really was.
Yeah. And as you said earlier, and this is what I've learned about a lot more recently, putting those thoughts out there and putting your channeling into like a frequency out there that is attracting more of that back to you, so that you are then, your body only will then move in a direction that kind of will, that has a reality that where you are still kind of, you're still sick. You're not going to be attracting healthy realities if you're thinking those negative thoughts. How did you start trying to get into that mindset? How did you start getting out of the Googling and the Facebook groups? What was it that made you make that decision?
Oh gosh, that's such a good question. I'm trying to remember, I think that really what allowed me to get out of that was, well, first of all, I did play the victim. And I was saying how my body was my identity, but I also think that my illness was my identity, because I used it as an excuse for a very long time to maybe hold me back, or, oh, this is the reason I haven't gotten to where I am, or this is the reason why I haven't achieved my fitness goals, or why I'm not as strong as I want to be, why I don't have as much muscle as I want to have. So it did become kind of like a victim story a little bit. And I think one day I was just, you know what, this can't be the thing anymore. So I was lucky that I had the mental fortitude and wherewithal to push through when I wasn't feeling well. Like that served me big time. But I do believe that what helped me kind of like snap out of all this stuff was when I did start to work with my coach and I started to feel better. Like I don't know where I would be right now had it not been for his support in getting me to this place. Because I don't think I would have ever let it like stop me from living my life if I had the ability to do so. You know, like I pushed through some pretty intense pain for a very long time. And I actually do want to talk about my back pain a little bit because last year I was listening to a podcast, and I guess the world works in mysterious ways, or the universe does. It was this podcast, like I listened to almost every episode, and this one just like didn't seem like it was going to resonate with me. It was about journaling. And even though I did journal at that time, like, cause I was working on all the mindset things, it's like, nah, I'm not going to listen to that. And then for whatever reason, I came back to it, and it was about journal speak. And I know that you interviewed somebody recently about the journal speak process.
Yeah. Is that Danny?
Danny,
Yeah.
My back pain that I had for 20 something years, like literally went away in 2 days.
Really?
And has not really come back. And I did everything. I mean, chiropractic, massage, acupuncture, stretching, like everything to try to get my back pain to feel better. I tried, and I feel like this is what made it a lot better. So just a lot of mindset shifts for sure. And I think autoimmune disease, chronic pain can be rooted in like trauma and unresolved emotions. I'm still kind of trying to figure out like what that is for me, but I do believe that there was a lot of stuff that I held in that I was not expressing, and that played a role in the experiences that I have had. So being able to get all that out and release what was a lot of like pent up anger and resentment, I think kind of allowed my nervous system to calm down a little bit, which was really helpful. And then because I was feeling better, it also allowed me to have a better mindset about things. You know?
It's funny also, just going back to you mentioned like the two approaches and of the doctors, where the psoriasis diagnosis, where he just said, I don't really have much for you, but this is going to be with you forever. And then that in itself was a trauma that then has a ripple effect and could then affect future diagnoses. You then, you get, a twinge in your shoulder and you're like, oh, I've got, something really serious. And that's because of the trauma. But then if you just had the, I think you said Vince, is that?
Vince, yeah.
He's just like, I've got you. As long as you fight, as long as you're under my care, as long as you do what I say, I've got you. It's fine. Yeah. Relax. You're going to make it. And that in itself is just wonderful. Like someone saying that to you, it's like a warm blanket over you. Just like,
oh, that's so true. That's so
nice.
True. Yes. I had faith. I think that was the problem. See, and I think you nailed it, because prior to that, I really didn't have the faith. Even my naturopathic doctor, as wonderful as he was just kind of like, yeah, well, we don't really know, and we'll try something else. And it's just like, nope, I know what to do. Like this is, and he's like, this is like a chess game. So you have to do exactly as I say, or you will, excuse my language, fuck up the entire protocol. Like that's literally what he said.
Yeah.
And so I did it. I followed it to a T, and he was right. So I think that allowed me to shift my mindset. So I think that, the positivity, and it can be really difficult to do when you were in the thick of things. And I empathize so much for the people who are listening who, are bedridden and who are not as fortunate as I am to still be able to, to move around and live a very, I guess, vibrant life. But there is a mindset shift that you have to make, where you have to like stop playing the victim and just, really one, I think, be grateful for what you do have, like that goes a long way. But just realize that the more you continue to focus on it, I think the more difficult you are making your healing, because your body believes everything that your brain says. So if you're seeking out evidence, if you're in these Facebook groups with all those negative people who are complaining, I even had to get out of the Journal Speak Facebook group because it was the same thing, people who still weren't healed yet and they want to commiserate about it. And then they want those other people to, chime in and feel bad for them. Like, I mean, I get it. It's a source of connection, but at some point, like, you just have to choose a different frame of mind.
Yeah, it's definitely the wrong sort of connection, though, isn't it?
Horrible.
It's like the way the office I used to work in. It got so, like, I actually loved everyone who worked there, but it got so toxic about the company that you would just get these core people that were just like, be at the bar or the pub on a Friday night and just be bitching about everything about the company, and it just dragged everyone down to that level. But you would feed upon it. I would be there, and I'd find myself, I would be doing it as well. And I was like, oh, wow, I'm becoming a really negative person. And it's just the same with that. And I mentioned it a few times on the podcast recently, just these Instagram accounts, which, really nice people that have set it up, and they're doing it for the right reasons, but they're putting out a negative message about how bad they feel, and it gets so much more engagement than a positive post does. And it's like that whole, I don't know, analogy, but you go past a car crash and you just can't help but look, because it's there's a negative thing there. Only negative things in the media gets attention, and it's just really sad. I wish it was the opposite. I wish there was a lot more attention on the positive. But I guess just going back to your that experience you had with him, with Vince, if you'd have had that at the beginning, do you think that everything could have been a lot easier? Not necessarily that plan, because obviously he had a plan, but just someone who was a bit more comforting and kind of took the responsibility and off you a little bit.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think so, because, well, it's hard to say because I was so young, and this is before I even started to do the inner work, the mindset work. So I don't know, maybe I would have been like so kind of in the thick of things that I would not have been open to that, or it would not have helped. It's hard to say, but I think that what you were asking is it makes a lot of sense. So before I met Vince, I was training at a powerlifting gym. It was an absolutely awful experience. I won't get into it, but the one benefit of that was my coach at the time, he introduced me to the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza. And I think that, I'm sure you've, come across him. And
just anyone who's listened to recent episodes, I've just been on one of his retreats.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I went to one of his.
People have these like miraculous healings. And I was like, okay,
yeah,
if someone who is in a wheelchair can have a miraculous healing from meditation, then what is possible for me?
Exactly.
So yeah, I was starting to see things different. I was choosing to focus my attention on things that were positive. So let me back up. I'm big on borrowing belief from other people who have come before you, who have achieved what you desire to achieve. So if I am stuck in these Facebook groups with people who are, just commiserating on how horrible they feel, then yes, those are what my thoughts are going to be. That is going to be what I attract and, continue to be my reality. If instead I am choosing to focus my attention on the work of my friend, and I call him Uncle Joe, and, all of the miraculous things that he is doing for people, then that gives me hope. So even if I am not there yet, if I look to other people to see, okay, this is what's possible, then I am going to have a more positive mindset. I am going to seek out more positive experiences and just feel more hopeful about the process overall. So I think that was the thing that kind of like got the wheels turning a little bit. And then again, I was getting more into spirituality. So doing that inner work, practicing gratitude, all of those things, which again, makes you focus more on what is good, not on what is bad. And then that coincided with me finding this person who was like, if you do what I say, you'll be okay.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. I mean, I think you need it. What I'm learning in the last few years, and people who've listened to this podcast will have heard me say this a number of times. Like, I was not ready to hear certain messages like a few
Mm.
years ago, and
Mhm.
I certainly wasn't at 22. I certainly wasn't at 28. But like, I think in recent years, I have been ready, and I was ready to hear about someone like Joe Dispenza and not like go, that's a load of crap. And you saying that, how you were describing it then, it just completely resonates with me. And it's so interesting that the people who come on the show, almost the majority of them have either done some of his work or they've heard of him, and just that kind of mindset anyway. So
Mhm.
would you say that, like, because of what you've been through, it's made you a more spiritual person?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Because it's allowed me to, I guess, have faith in something greater than myself. So another thing that I did prior to working with Vince, I went through the 12-step program. So that is a very spiritual. I mean, they talk about God, but
Mm.
I replaced, even though I grew up Catholic, I replaced God with, higher power, something like that. So,
Mm.
and I was not addicted to anything, like any substance. My sponsor said that I was an emotional addict. So, which I think it's all connected. Like I was saying earlier, the people pleasing, the perfectionism, the bad body image, all
Mm.
of that. So that just kind of like ran the show. And those were the thoughts that were always in my mind. So when I went through that process, I did like an emotional excavation of sorts, which really helped. And that, I would say that was kind of like the first step. And then after that, I learned about Dr. Joe. So yeah, just having faith in something greater than myself is
Mm.
very powerful. I think for
Yeah.
anybody it is, you know? And
Basically,
so, yeah.
yeah. So I was just saying, like, great, something greater than yourself. Actually believing that there's something. We all go through life thinking that life's a bit mundane. It's like, you go to work, you try and earn money to get a better life. That's all that life is. Actually, it's a lot more magical than that, and it's really nice to feel like that.
It's so magical. And whenever you don't have faith in something, like get into nature and connect with nature because it is truly magical. When you go to I'm trying to think of like a good example, like Yosemite, so to speak, that's in California. And you see these amazing, mountains and like formations. It's like something created that. That didn't just like happen out of nowhere.
Mm.
So the world it's magical. It really is. And I just choose to believe that even if I can sometimes like blame God or blame the higher power, like, how could you have let this happen to me? I still choose to trust that I'm being guided in some way and that, you know, I was put here on this earth to carry out some sort of purpose or message just like you.
Mm.
And yeah, like our circumstances are shitty and I wish that we didn't have to go through it, but I believe that we're here for a reason, that we were given these situations for a reason, and it is to, you know, carry out our message, impact other people who are going through things as well.
What are the other ways you feel like your life's, had you not, got what had you not got psoriasis that day, and had you not got sick in the way you got sick, how is your life better as a result of what you've been through now, would you say?
Mm, I probably still would have, I mean, who knows? Again, like
Mm.
hindsight's 2020, so you really can't say for sure. But would I have ever gotten out of that disordered eating and exercise mindset? I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of the thing that like put me on the right path. And it's like, you got to do something about this or else you're going to continue making yourself sick,
Mm.
and things are just going to get worse.
Do you think there's an element of, like, a lot of people have to learn their lessons physically and mentally when they get really up when they get far older, and their body starts to break down. But then they're so set in their ways at that point that it's very difficult for them to change. Whereas for people like us, we got it early, so we actually are able to change easier, and we're like front loading. This is the way I'm hoping that life is going. I've front loaded a lot of those issues, and I'm going to work through them, but it's just going to mean that I'm so better set for the last, not say the last half of my life, but for the older years, and that actually I'll be so well set up to live a lot longer and live a lot healthier into my old age. Do you think that as well?
Absolutely. I mean, I hate to say this because I love them dearly, but I see my parents now as they're getting older. They're in their, early 70s, but they definitely both have, some health issues, and they are so set in their ways. Like, they don't want to see anything else. One of my favorite sayings is, you can't read the label when you're inside the jar. So sometimes, like, when you're so stuck in your shit, like, you can't see anything outside of that. And also, they're just used to doing things how they always did them. So I mentioned this early in the podcast when it came to how I was raised, but I think we're all doing the best we can with the level of awareness that we have and the tools that we have available to us at the time. So for those people who are older and they're just, very like regimented. And also your nervous system, when you get older, like, it changes too. So you're less, I guess, flexible, so to speak. So your mindset is a little bit more fixed. And if that is the case, then you're not going to be as open to new ways of thinking, to new possibilities. So I look at my parents, it's like, let's just keep putting a Band-Aid on everything. Like, let's get the surgery, let's take the pill. And it's like, well, why don't we like heal your trauma? Let's practice some gratitude. Let's, just work on the mindset, and maybe the body will follow. It's like, I even see my mom just get so upset about things. And I was like, here's a journal. Just start free writing. It's going to make you feel so much better.
Yeah. No, my mum's got a really bad back pain, and I was telling her about actually Danny's episode and the book with John Sarno, and then I was also talking about Joe Dispenza, and there were people at that retreat who were in their 80s, and I think someone who was even 90, and just healing back pain and pain that they had all over their body. But yeah, I think I'd have to get her there against her will if she was to go.
Well, and it's like, is that even worth it? Because people have to be ready to change. And I think that if they're not fully ready, then it's not going to work. Like, I know for myself, I was so ready, and I was like, I am willing to do whatever at this point. I will do whatever, and not everybody is there, and it can be scary. Well, here's I think I said this earlier, like the identity thing. Some people, they like having that story of, I have the pain, I have the illness, because, whether it gets them attention, like that could be part of it. I don't know if maybe that was part of it for me, because like I felt for a long time that I lived in other people's shadows, that I like wasn't really seen. So that's where the body image stuff came from, and working on my body. Like, oh, maybe people will notice me if I look really good. But, was it also, or am I going to get more attention if I'm constantly sick? Like, people are going to give me that comfort, that support, but also, is that story allowing me to not fully live my life because I'm fearful of something happening? So if I and this is kind of an example, if I say to myself, oh, I have these chronic illnesses, I never feel well, my last husband left me because of it, then if I heal, like, what does that mean for me? So I'm just going to, maybe it means like I open myself up to love again, and then I get hurt again. But if I use that story of, someone's going to have to take care of me the rest of my life, so I may as well not put myself out there and date again. Now I can just like hold on to that story, stay in my little comfort bubble, and never get hurt again. Or if I'm using that story to not build my business, then I don't have to risk failing. So I think there's a lot to that as well.
Yeah. It's all about the stories we tell ourselves, isn't it?
Oh yeah. And I always say, you can rewrite your story at any time.
100%.
So you and I are both doing that, my friend.
Yeah.
It's great to see.
And I guess my final question that I like to ask people is, so someone who's listening to this right now who's at their darkest hour, probably at any stage in the whole process of their illness, what advice would you give to them in order to just keep going? Not necessarily a practical advice, just what is advice like mentally would you give to them?
I think just be open to new ways of doing things. Like, don't stop until you find the answer. The answer is out there. It is 100% out there. I believe that with every fiber of my being, that, there is a solution for every problem. And that's another spiritual quote. Like, there's a spiritual solution for every problem. So yeah, don't give up on yourself. Believe, keep the faith, do the work, whatever that work looks like for you, whether it's just working on your mindset and the way you see things, whether that's doing the work to rewrite your story, whether that's doing the work to continue fighting for yourself, being your own best advocate, and finding the people that are going to help you, because, I know that everybody is deserving of that, and it can happen. Like, I was in a very dark place for so long where I thought that this was just going to be my destiny. And now here I am living a completely different life.
Yeah. No, that's such good advice, and no, that's really really good way to end the podcast. And thanks so much for coming on. If people wanted to get in touch with you to ask you any questions, and I tend to kind of like shy away from specifics of how you recovered, just because I want to focus more on mindset, but I know people might have some questions around that, and they might have questions around your online coaching thing. What's the best way of them getting in touch with you?
Instagram DM, that's where I spent most of my time. So Marci Nevin on Instagram. That's the best way.
Awesome. I will. I'll include that in the show notes. So yeah, that's absolutely great. Thank you so much for coming on and spending your Friday with me. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. It was so much fun. Thank you for having me. You have a good weekend.